Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today in another episode of the Languages Pedagogy Podcast. Today we have another amazing, wonderful guest, Francoise Rault. No, terrible. That's it. That's it.
Well
I lost
done,
my
well
job.
done.
I'm not a good teacher. I'm not a good learner. No, terrible. Fran, we have Fran today here with us. Thank you very much, Fran. You're also a great teacher. I've noticed in your LinkedIn, and I think your insights might be really helpful in this little corner here. I always call it little corner, but I really love it. It's a really good corner where I can actually just get together with different educators, different branches, and from different sides of education, and it's really good. So welcome. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mike. It's always an honor to be here and to be with other like-minded individuals. So I'm Fran. I'm a multilingual learner myself. French is my first language. English is my second language, and went through what was then called the ESL system for that wonderful time period of middle school, high school. So all my friends were hanging out at the mall after school. I was staying in school an extra 45 minutes every day learning English. So that's a little bit about my personal journey into multilingualism. And here I am a few years later. I'm not going to age myself just yet, but I have been teaching for 17 years. It'll be 18 very soon. And I've taught in Japan, Canada, where I'm from, Toronto, Canada, and where I currently am in Beijing, China. And in that time, I've worked with a variety of ages, but I actually started my teaching career with adult education in Japan, working with university students, professionals, those who were learning English with very strong purpose. And since then, I've had a couple different roles, but currently working as a coach in an international school here in central Beijing.
Oh, that sounds really good. I love it. So you've been 17 years working. You've been in this field for 17 years. Well, that's pretty beautiful. Really beautiful. Throughout the
Hmm.
world, I guess, right? As you said, Canada, Japan, China, anywhere else? I mean,
Correct.
any other place? Any other country?
No, not for teaching. No, no, no.
Not for teaching, just vacation, holiday.
Mhm.
Pretty well deserved vacation there. Cool. So now you're actually
Mhm.
doing some coaching, you said.
Correct. Yes. Coaching, working with adults, with teachers, coaching teachers, a little bit around supporting practices, inclusive practices for multilingual learners. So, working with a predominantly, I'm going to say 98% non-English speaking student body in an English medium school. So
Mhm.
this is the definitely post-COVID, a very common demographic we're seeing increasingly here. And with that, we've had to really change and adapt how we plan, how we instruct, how we assess so many different areas of teaching.
True that. Well, a lot of things actually changed after COVID. And you're actually doing
Hmm.
this coaching job like a personal job? Is it your personal brand or something like it? Or is it that you're representing a company on editorial or something like it?
Right now, a little bit of both, but right now, predominantly working with another company, with a
Mhm.
school.
Got it.
Hmm.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. So today's topic, it's actually one of the topics that I was thinking to do it with you because I think you're pretty knowledgeable in this context because you've been actually just traveling around. You experience the ESL world as well, and for sure you can tell us a lot about it. So today's topic is why adults and teenagers struggle to learn languages and what school never tell you.
Hmm.
Because this is another story, right?
Hmm.
I'm not so much of a fan of systems, maybe. I hate the systems. I hate this. I go against them. I don't like them.
Okay.
I think they're
Okay.
pretty much of
Eh,
a pain in the ass, I would say.
Oh boy. Okay. So you're a little anti-establishment, I take it. Got it.
Yes, I want to go totally against them. Yeah. But well, I'm not in a good place actually to say that. But anyway, uh, So now that you've been actually teaching in Japan, in this country, let's start there. Across this context and all this, do adults and teenagers struggle with languages in the same way, or are their challenges fundamentally different?
I think there are some fundamental differences, without a doubt. I can think of a variety of differences, but I will say, when we first learn language as a child, when we're, starting to strengthen the muscles in our mouths and learning how to use our tongue and learning how to form sounds, not even knowing what they mean, we're immersed in it just very organically. It's not a purposeful, I am learning. It's just this very, the brain is wired to speak and to listen. It's very organic. It doesn't require instruction as a child. However, as we get older, it does require that. And one of the reasons is thinking about exposure. As a child, when we're growing
Right.
up, or even just a toddler, a baby, we're hearing sounds, we're hearing noises, we're hearing words, we're hearing language. We are immersed in it. And without teaching, you're going to learn it. You're going to pick it up. However, as adults, you don't have that exposure. So one of the greatest advantages is that a child will have heard a language, they've spoken a language before they're expected to read and write it. However, often with teenagers, with adults, when you're learning an additional language, you're expected to read and write it, yet you still haven't had the opportunity to hear it and to speak it. I think that is one of the biggest fundamental differences with teaching adults an additional language compared to children.
Children.
Yeah, and when I was working in Toronto and I was teaching French, I was a French immersion teacher there for 6 years and in kindergarten. So, the first couple of years of school, we always really focused on that listening and speaking. And you don't really get into the reading and the writing till a little bit later because we know you can't read and write a language you don't hear and speak. Yet for some reason, it seems that we kind of as people get older, we think, well, it's okay. They're just going to pick it up. That's something we hear a lot. They're going to pick it up.
Yeah.
Just being in that environment, they're going to pick it up. But the reality is that they haven't been in that environment for a long time. Yet we still have these assumptions, making these assumptions that they're still going to be able to read and write a language. So I think that's one of the fundamental differences that we see is that around that exposure
Yeah.
of language, what we're hearing and what we're speaking, what we're saying.
That is a good point in exposure. That is immersion, exposure, or somewhere in between. But the thing is that I don't know what you think about this, but are you part of this world that believes that children learn faster than adults, or you are those type of teachers that say, oh no, this is just a myth. It's not like that.
I know I think when you're looking at in what capacity, I don't know that children necessarily learn faster. When you're looking at certain theories, um, there is this theory that, the earlier exposure you have to a language, the better. And really, after, decades of research, what we've learned is one of the biggest differences is learning an additional language as an adult, where as opposed to learning it as a child, is around pronunciation and that native like pronunciation. So, for example, I started learning English when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And that was just because I moved from a French speaking environment to an English speaking environment, but I didn't really learn to read and write it till much later. And hearing me today as an adult, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that English is my second language. So I'd say that's one of the differences. So I don't know that we're necessarily learning it faster. I just think, again, going back to that exposure, we're having more time with it. Um, and at the same time, I think you look at, how do I say this? Environments are so key as well, though, that kind
Mhm.
of those social emotional factors, those motivational factors, that can impact how quickly you're going to learn something, and
True.
what the motivation is that lies behind that. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. That's another one. Yeah. But you've been actually working a lot with adults as well, a lot in Japan, you told me, I think.
Correct.
So in Japan, you were actually working with them. Do you see any difference culturally speaking when learning a language?
You mean culturally with an adult compared to a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
child?
No, no, no. Adults. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In
I,
Canada,
I,
in Japan, China. How do you see it? I mean, is there any difference? I mean, in language learning?
well, I think, the where you're learning is always going to be have an impact on it, absolutely, and that goes from how a culture, a society deems learning happens. For
Mm,
example, how a teacher is trained in country A compared to country B compared to country C is going to be very different, or sometimes it's going to be very alike as well. So I think that can have
true.
it, but I think ultimately, I think culture and I'm going to kind of go back to what I said a little bit earlier in that sense around, motivation. I know, for example, in Canada, learning a second language, like in many parts of the world, like Japan, like China,
Yeah.
learning an additional language has huge value, and it's seen to really support professional growth, economical growth, social growth. And so for those, and that's a really important factor, and we can't underestimate that. So when I was working with adults, for example, in China, young adults, university students, that economical factor was huge. That employment, that opportunity to gain employment faster, to move, through the ladder of growth, that was a huge factor. That was so important. In some other parts of the world, they might not necessarily see that because, for example, they don't have that need to go overseas to travel internationally.
Yeah.
So it really depends a little bit on that
Mm.
on that area. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a point there. Yeah, I believe so. I don't know why you actually remind me of one of my colleagues back in the States. Uh, he was one of the says, I mean, why would I actually travel? Why would I learn another language if I'm here already? I mean, why would I do that? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, it was like, "Mhm, might be right," but I'm like, oh, geez, what an idiot. He
Mm-hmm.
might be listening to this now. If you listen to me
And
right now, it doesn't matter. But it's true. I mean, well, what's the point about regardless of the country where you're living, I think a language is something that goes beyond that. Not the
yeah.
country, not political. It's actually more scientific, more neuroscientifically. I mean, let's go in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, in your experience now that we have these adults learning languages, have you had these ones that feel stuck? So, like, no, my brain cannot just is not wired for languages.
I think I don't know that it's that a brain is maybe not wired for language. I think one of the biggest challenges I see is, unlearning
Mm,
a skill or a method or something that was maybe not the best teaching. And we're seeing this a lot, nowadays, for example, with reading, and we're realizing that, there's this we're rethinking phonics. We're bringing phonics back for a very long time. It was phonics is boring. We don't need it. That, exposure,
mhm.
students can, see a word and they can guess, et cetera, or look at the picture and they can learn to read by looking at the picture. And um, so I think what I experience is that, or what I notice and observed is that when something's been taught just poorly, when it's been taught badly, but it's been drilled and ingrained so many times that unlearning
Mm,
is so much more unlearning a poor habit, a weak habit is so much more difficult than learning a better one, a correct one, a healthy one. Not just with education, but in many areas of life too, that we see that. um,
yes.
but I think that is something that can cause a lot of frustration. And I think maybe sometimes because of that, people collapse that with thinking, well, I'm not wired. I'm not wired. It's not that you're not wired. Your brain was wired to do, something in a certain way for so long. And we know that the brain is plastic and we know that it can change and it can be rewired, but that takes time. It takes dedication. It
Neuroplasticity,
takes a
right?
certain, yeah, neuroplasticity. It takes quite an investment.
True.
So that's where I think we have to be careful about saying that, I'm not able to read or learn an additional language or whatnot. Um, and we're still learning a lot about how the brain learns. That's the
True.
reality. We're learning more and more about this. We know more today than we did 10 years ago, than we did 20 years ago. I think so much about when I was doing my teacher preparation program, how much has changed since then. And there's so little, if anything that I learned then that I'm applying in the classroom today. So we have to have a certain grace, I think, too, that we're still learning a lot about
True.
how we learn. Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that perspective.
Capture life precious moments in stunning details with our professional cameras. Unleash your creativity and preserve memories like never before. Visit us now at
We learn. Yeah.
frameflowcn.com.
I like
Yeah.
that perspective. Very interesting perspective because most of the people actually don't want to learn because they have the thing, Maybe they are not intrinsically motivated. They don't want to actually learn because they
Yeah.
want to. They're just stuck in that era where no, you're too much of an adult to learn something new. Back
Yeah.
in the days, it was like that. Oh no, you're too old to learn. That's it. You cannot do it.
Mm.
Your time, your train just passed. Thank you very much. It was like that back in the days, but I think mostly we have this problem with the teachers back then. Don't you think so?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I think. When I was in school, it was very teacher directed. It was, you sat, you listened, you took
Yeah,
notes, and not speaking and not being heard and not being seen was like a positive. And it's
yeah,
interesting because today that's seen, as a bit of a negative, if you're not engaging and you're not talking, and now it's like, oh, we want to have that buzz. We want to be hearing those discussions. We want to be, hearing that engagement and that collaboration. That's something that, 15, 20 years ago, no, 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 no. And even longer. So, I think a lot is changing, has changed and is changing and is going to continue to change. But I think what we perceived as learning and as engagement has really changed. And part of that, can be cultural too. Part of that can definitely be cultural too. That, you know, um, how we show respect to our teachers is by doing, A, B, and C. Whereas for me, raising your hand, engaging, talking with your classmates, showing, some sort of investment in the material, that to me is a positive. But a classroom of complete silence, I struggle with that. I would struggle with that. Yeah.
yeah. No, those type of classrooms are kind of scary. It's like a scary movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. So now that you've been actually going around these three countries and learning a little bit about their systems and all that, uh, do you think the language industry sometimes sells unrealistic expectations about how fast someone can become fluent?
I don't think language industries solely. I think um, I think publishing companies. I think there's a lot of organizations and groups that profit off selling, education.
Yeah,
Um, and and I can understand that, this is the world that we live in. We're living in a world of economies, and this is the reality of the world that we live in. We need people to be spending. We need people to be
yeah,
investing. Um, and I think, promises are, there are false promises, but I could say that about, of education, public education and Ministry of Education as well. I can't just say it's, these kind of after school programs that are charging money. I can't just say it's that. I think in general, we're selling a lot. We're trying to sell a lot, and you look at public education, your child is going to come to school for X amount of years, for 12
sure.
years or so, and they're going to graduate. They're going to be fluent in reading and writing and math and this and that and physics and chemistry and biology and a variety of subjects.
Yeah,
I've missed many, and the reality is they're not going to be. And so I think, and that I think that's just a sad reality of the world that we live in today. Is there's a lot of promises made about, how we're going to learn, what success is going to look like, and how student A learns compared to student B compared to student C is very different. And
Yeah.
that program or that is going to work for some students, but it's not going to work for everyone. And I think maybe that's what the error that's made is that we're kind of trying to sell one thing. And again, when I say sell, I'm not talking about, just certain schools that are purely profit based, but just this idea that as education in all its pieces, in all its capacities, in all its ways, is trying to say that we are going to educate you.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's so many ways to learn. And I think I remember reading at a conference and somebody said, teaching nowadays it's like hosting a dinner party, and somebody's vegetarian, somebody's gluten-free, somebody's fasting, somebody's on the Atkins
That
diet.
sounds
So
very
and
annoying.
it's not so much that it's annoying, but it's like, how are you going to cater a meal, to you've got 8 friends coming over, and
Yeah.
how are you going to cater a meal to 8 people with very different dietary needs or allergies or lifestyles. And I think education is like that too. And I think what's responsible education is thinking, okay, well, I know this person is how am I going to kind of make a dinner, make a meal that's going to meet for everybody's needs, and they might not be met 100%. That's okay, but
Yeah.
where can I meet them so that everyone's leaving the table full and happy
That
and
sounds pretty bad.
satiated.
That's really super. Yeah, that sounds super bad actually, because that's something that I've actually seen here. I gotta say it in China, because that's what I've seen in here. A lot of schools actually just advertise like you become fluent in 3 months, in 4 months, 6 months. You're gonna be almost a native level. You're gonna reach that level,
Mhm.
native level, 6 months. You're gonna do it. You're gonna learn 3,000 words a month or a week, and by the end of the 6 month, you will be even better than a native speaker. I've seen it. And
Mhm.
those are the type of advertisement that actually goes to adults, not to children. I don't know if you've actually come across this type of ads.
I haven't, I have to be honest with you, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. But I mean, I remember, as a child on TV watching, these kind of programs, that like, realistic, unrealistic, excuse me, like, weight loss programs or, certain things like that. Like just, and I think, it's, so that chasing that dream, we're chasing that dream.
What
And
I don't remember this type of well, back in the days there were a couple of those unrealistic advertisement on TV and all
hmm
those. Yeah, totally unrealistic. Just like
hmm
this one, how's it called? Oh my God, not so long ago. It was so funny, stupidly funny. Because it was some sort of like a, no, not AI. I forgot. Really weird company. It was an online selling
hmm
online courses and all that, and always try to make fun of people who were not actually pronouncing pretty well or something like it. Pretty bad.
Oh no.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no.
Yeah, that's another issue. But anyway, that's what happened. And now that you're in this adults learners environment, how do you how do you actually help these adult learners, like being um, in the exposure part? What do you recommend them? How do you help them in that sense to be more to get that exposure, to increase the exposure
I
outside the classroom,
think,
of course.
yeah, and it is a challenge. It is a challenge. If you're only hearing, language or getting that instruction when you're in a class, for a couple hours a week.
Hmm.
Um, so I think, with adults generally because they're very motivated, they can invest time outside. They have maybe a bit more autonomy over their schedule, for example, compared to a child. But I think, when you're an adult and you're motivated and you have a goal, you're committed to that, and you're going to make it. You're going to do what you need to do to make it. So, I always think traveling, I think, is really important to a country where that language is spoken or it's
Oh,
um, somewhat prevalent. Um, I think looking at, what is an industry, the language, the context of your industry. So if you're going to be studying finance or economics or business or
mhm,
whatnot, really having that content knowledge, that background knowledge of that area, I think it's very important. We're learning more and more that background knowledge is really when it comes to learning a language is so
mhm.
important because there's so much in that. So I think I would always tell students, whatever it is that you're interested in, I'm not going to be teaching you, as a language teacher about, micro and macroeconomics, for example.
Yeah,
Um,
that's too
but,
technical.
yeah, that's too technical, and I don't know enough about it to be honest with you. But what I can do is I can tell you what, explain to you why learning that is very important and learning that maybe in your home language and then, trying to learn it in the additional language, if that's English, for example, is important. So I think, the content is very important. It's and language and content are very tightly connected. So I think that's something that adults can do
Well,
compared
that's
to
the
students
Clio.
where, yeah, yeah. And, whereas for students, it's, they're maybe a bit more dependent on teachers to gain that knowledge, to learn that knowledge, or on a parent or, another teacher. I think as adults, they can take that on a bit themselves, for sure.
Yeah. Well, adults, it's always a problem in this sense, also when talking about motivation. But you have students who are really motivated to learn a language.
Hmm.
But why does that motivation often fade over time?
Um, oh gosh, good question. For a variety of reasons. It can be that we're not getting to where we want in a timely manner.
Hmm.
I think whenever we have a goal, whether it's, saving money, paying off debt, losing weight, we kind of have an idea, a date in our timeline. I'm going to do it by then, and
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't happen, and often for a good reason it doesn't happen, and that can impact motivation. So I think when that happens, I always think, go back to your goal. What was it that you wanted to achieve?
Yeah.
I think that really impacts, you know, that I think is one of the greater factors that impacts motivation. And I can think too, there's sometimes things going on in the rest of the world that can also impact, your motivation and things that happen that are out of your control that will impact motivation as well. There are countries, there are parts of the world that I've wanted to move to, that I've wanted to live to, but the geopolitical climate will change and that's no longer an option, for example. And
That's
that
true.
definitely impacts motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, adults, we're actually in a world that is pretty unstable. Sometimes it's pretty hard actually just to be like on one side. I never actually thought. Now talking a little bit about this, I never thought actually I was come here to China. First of all,
Mm, mm,
it was a total new experience. But well, one
mm.
thing led to another, and here we are. Motivation, anyway. Motivation was to teach, keep doing my career, building up the career and all that. But it was pretty good. For sure, that's the same case that you had a little bit there. Now, in Beijing, you are working also in a high school, right?
No, a
Oh, no,
full
no.
continuum school.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. So what when talking about teenagers now, uh, why some teenagers often understand a language but refuse to speak? What psychological factors are at play there? Because
Um,
it
th
happens a
there can be,
lot.
yeah, there can be many. There could be so many. I think one can be just, fear of making a mistake. I think fear of how do I sound. I think sometimes, depending on where we are in our kind of language acquisition journey, we need a bit more time. Like, we're still going to hear something in the second language or the additional language. We're going to translate it into our home language. Think about the answer, think about what is the output, and then having to translate that back into that additional language. That takes a little bit of time. And sometimes we feel that pressure to answer and produce quickly, right away,
Yeah,
timely, timely,
true.
timely. I think from what I noticed when I was teaching, a bit more older high school students, university students, I think those were the two that I that I'm aware of the most, just that fear of making a mistake and then that pressure to produce immediate responses and answers.
So how much does that fear affect language learning for older learners, for adults, for example?
I think if you're in an environment, I think I'm going to put this onto the teachers, that when you're in an environment where it's safe, where it's psychologically safe, I think that can really minimize those fears.
Mhm.
And like any new habit, it takes a bit of time. It's going to take time, and there needs to be with both parties, the students and the teachers, both need to be patient. Yeah, I think. And it's there's always so many reasons. No two students are identical, so